You're overworked, you're already stretched thin, and now you're going to do a capital campaign on top of it all?
Welcome to All About Capital Campaigns, a podcast that provides fuel for your nonprofit's growth. Each week, Amy Eisenstein and Andrea Kihlstedt, co-founders of Capital Campaign Pro, provide practical tips about raising more money for your nonprofit organization. Here are your hosts, Amy and Andrea.
Hi, I'm Amy Eisenstein. I'm here with my colleague and co-founder, Andrea Kihlstedt, and today we are talking about staffing during a capital campaign or staffing up for a capital campaign. Andrea, this is such an important topic. Why are we talking about it?
Amy, it really is an important topic, and there are several reasons we're talking about it. The first one that comes to my mind is that capital campaigns are opportunities to get your board and your executive director to invest in the organization, right? Capital campaigns are a big deal.
Yes.
You will raise a ton of money during the capital campaign. And because of that, people may be willing to invest in the development shop, right? In staffing for your campaign because the returns are likely to be so high. So this is an opportunity for you probably to bring on staff that you wished you had had for quite some time.
Yes. I mean, think about it. Campaigns are capacity building for your organization at their essence, right? Your whole organization grows. So your development shop can grow too, proportionally with your organization. At the end of a campaign, you're likely to need more resources. You're going to have more programs. You're going to have more infrastructure. You're going to have more program staff. And so you're going to need to fund all of that growth some way. So taking advantage and using this unique opportunity to enhance your development systems and infrastructure and staffing for increased fundraising in the future is the right move. So that's what we're talking about today. But of course, many boards and leadership teams resist staffing up. In fact, we know that lots of organizations proceed placing the full burden of the campaign on already overstretched, overworked development staff. So let's talk about it. So the question is, do you need to staff up? Let's
the question is not do you need to staff up. The question is, when do you need to staff up?
And how? Yes.
And how, right?
Good.
I mean, everybody needs to staff up in some way or other. So, to raise $3 million, $5 million, $10 million, $20 million on top of what you already raised through a campaign is not child's play. You don't wake up with a magic wand and wave it around and have that money emerge. Somebody's doing the work, and somebody's doing it in addition to all of the other development work that happens. So, question isn't, do you need to staff up? It's when and how. Let's talk a little about when.
Okay.
Right? So, because I think it's interesting. We think about campaigns in terms of phases. And the first phases are the pre-campaign planning, campaign planning phase, and then this long, quiet phase of a campaign where you're soliciting the largest gifts. In fact, during that quiet phase, it's a ton of work, but it's not work that requires a huge amount of administration because you're soliciting 20, 30, 40 people. You're not soliciting thousands of people, right? It's a fairly targeted chunk of work. So you need people working on it who are the right people. And one of those right people is almost always the executive director. Now, did that give you a shock through your system?
I don't think people thought we were going to start there.
Right.
We're going to start at the top of the organization. What's the executive director's role? And they're not sitting around twiddling their thumbs, reading novels at their desk prior to a campaign. So how do we expect them to add a significant chunk of work that is a campaign and dealing with donors and sitting on committees and working with volunteers and meeting with consultants to their already busy plates.
So
Okay.
it may be that the first ad to your staff, to your, kind of fundraising staff, sort of, is to work with the executive director to get that person administrative support, to free the executive director's time up so that their work gets done and they have maybe a third of their time available to work on the capital campaign. Right now, that's not directly hiring development staff, but it will bring you high-level development staff, namely your ED, right?
And that's who
Because
the donors want to meet with. The
that's
biggest
right.
donors want to meet with your executive director. So, if your executive director isn't a fundraiser or into that, you have another set of issues. But let's assume that your executive director understands the job, and that is primarily meeting with donors, especially in these early phases of the campaign or prospective donors. So they need some administrative support. They need things taken off their plate. And if they're doing primarily program stuff, maybe they need an assistant program director or something like that but the executive director needs some significant support for a campaign. Good. Who's next?
If your executive director is willing and understands that this is likely to be his or her role is likely to be important in the campaign, one of the things that we sometimes recommend and works like a charm if you can make it happen is to get the executive director to write down what they do for a week or two, to write down everything they do for a week or two. And then at the end of that period to actually underline or circle all the things they might offload to someone else and see what kind of a staff position they need in order to do that, to free up their time. It's a very simple exercise, but if an executive director is willing to do it, it often is quite revealing and really helpful in getting them to figure out, okay, how do I free up my time so that I have this amount of time available for the campaign?
And I always joke whenever you say that exercise, Andrea, which I love, that if the executive director can't find anything to circle or underline that they're willing to offload, there's another issue. They're a control freak, right?
Right.
Right. This is helping your executive director grow. They are doing things that other people that can be delegated or done by other people. Right. So the question is identifying those things and really helping your organization grow and helping them grow as a leader. That's part of the process. It's a great exercise to do. All right. Let's talk about the development director.
Organizations, we work with many organizations and they're of all different stripes, right? In terms of how many people they have in the development shop, how effective they are. Sometimes, even in a pretty good sized shop, the development director and one other person run it all. And they're all scrambling to get it done, right? And to keep it done. I mean, maybe they have one person who's doing some communications. Maybe they have one person who's entering gifts, right? And managing the database.
Right. Maybe somebody's grant writing.
Maybe somebody's grant writing. Maybe they're offloading all of the grant writing. Maybe somebody's putting together the plans and reports and donor communications. Look and see who's doing what. And if it feels like a jumble and you have two people sort of just scrambling to get everything together, this is a time to say, well, what would our development shop look like if we had the appropriate staffing? And start there. Say, okay, do we need an administrative assistant? Do we need a major gifts person? Do we need someone to handle the annual fund entirely?
Communications.
Communications.
Grant writing.
Actually doing all of that work. And understanding that you're going to need some additional time, a lot of additional time to do the campaign. How would you flesh out your development shop to accommodate the campaign?
Yep. I think so you can do the same exercise with your development director as we just suggested for the executive director. The development director can write down what they do over the course of 1 to 2 weeks and then figure out, where are my skills and talents strongest? Where are the holes? What am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? What am I doing that I don't really want to be doing? Data entry or grant writing or planning events or what communications, whatever the case may be. So some of this can be outsourced, right? You can use subcontractors or vendors for grant writing or communications. You don't have to bring on all staff, but it is important to understand that and for your board members to understand that the idea that you would take your existing development staffing and leadership team and expect them to raise 2 times, 10 times, 20 times more for a campaign with the exact same staffing structure, it's unfair. It's, it's a recipe for burning out your team, and it's just unrealistic.
Yeah, it's interesting as I think about the campaigns that I personally have worked on. And what I've seen is that they haven't had to hire a slew of staff members, right? But they've had to become much more efficient in how they run their development shop. They've had to look very strategically in what they really need. And for the most part, what they're lacking is administrative support, admin support. Right now, they have some choices. They can hire a full-time admin person who might work for one or two of the development staff people. That's one possibility. If they don't think they can get funding for a full staff position, they can actually bring in a virtual assistant.
And we've started doing that with our clients. We've started seeing some real success with clients using virtual assistants. So that's always, a great option in this day and age where technology makes it possible for you to work with anyone, anywhere. So we love the idea of virtual assistants.
Yeah, and then you're not needing a full budget line, right, for a full organizational budget line to do that. You can then charge that directly to the campaign with the understanding that as the campaign comes to an end, that that role would easily go away as opposed to hiring a staff person. Now, if you're able to use the campaign to hire a staff person, you should do that. Let me say.
Keep them and keep
them
and the
keep
virtual
them.
assistant.
Right,
I mean,
right.
honestly, hopefully a virtual assistant will be so valuable that you will not let them go to me, that's the goal, is to increase the scope and scale and capacity of your development and your fundraising. Your fundraising should increase after a campaign, not go back to what it was pre-campaign levels, but you should be more sophisticated. You should be working with donors at a higher level. You should have raised awareness. You should have increased your donor base. So to me, the idea is to keep those staff members and raise more money post-campaign than you did pre-campaign. Let's talk about budgeting for a minute because, the idea is that you should have a campaign budget. I think you alluded to it earlier, Andrea. So staffing up is part of an expense of running a campaign. Now, the overall campaign budget, including staff and donor recognition and campaign materials and all campaign-related expenses, might come in around 10% of your campaign goal. Raising, a ROI of expense of 10% to raise $1 is amazing in fundraising, and no business would blink at a 10% investment. So that's, talk in numbers that your board can understand, that adding staff will increase. Obviously, good staff, the goal is to significantly increase the fundraising so the ROI is high. One aspect of this idea of staffing up for a campaign we haven't talked about is consulting and campaign expertise. So I just want to bring it up because what we've talked about so far are implementers, feet on the ground, boots on the ground, whatever you call it, people to implement the campaign. But the likelihood is high that none of the people that you have on your team or that you're bringing on have extensive campaign expertise. And you will also need someone to help with the strategy. And that's strategy, accountability, guidance, planning. That's where campaign expertise and campaign consulting comes in. So that's an additional quote unquote member of the campaign fundraising team that you will need to account for and add at various points in your campaign early on. We talked about timing, but we didn't talk about timing, Andrea. So maybe now's
we talked about the beginning of the campaign.
Yeah, so campaign expertise you want at the beginning of the campaign so that you plan it correctly even way before you start raising any money. How else do you think about timing?
Well, what I think about timing is that as the campaign moves forward, as you get towards the end of the quiet phase of the campaign, when you've been soliciting a relatively few very large gifts, you move towards the campaign kickoff, which is an event, a significant event, takes a ton of work and a ton of planning. And then you move into the the public phase of the campaign and the follow-up, right? In the public phase, which isn't very long, but it takes a huge amount of effort to broaden any kind of fundraising. Now we're not talking about soliciting 30, 40, 50 gifts. Now we're talking about reaching hundreds of people, maybe even thousands of people, and having to account for all of that communication, all of those gifts as they come in, having to communicate well with them all, having to have cultivation events, having to have follow-up events, having to have gatherings, out in the community. All of that takes staff time. So as the campaign gets broader towards the end, you will need more staff, even though the amount of money you're bringing in these later parts of the campaign is not nearly as significant as the money you will bring in the beginning, where you needed less staff, though more powerful leadership staff. At the end, you will need more hands on deck to help make all of that activity happen and manage all of the activity effectively and well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I think staffing is so complicated these days. That might be a great opportunity for some virtual assistants. But, hiring administrative staff at the beginning of the campaign or a campaign manager or outsourcing some of the work. I mean, hiring is so hard these days, Andrea.
Well, let's talk about outsourcing, because there are things that can be outsourced. One of them is communications.
Yes.
Your campaign should have really good communications. You should be able to tell great stories. You should be able to have materials and videos and various other ways of communicating things that actually touch people's hearts through your campaign. And if you have one maybe part-time comms person, maybe one full-time comms person, they're not going to be able to do what needs to be done. So you can offload, you can actually hire a firm to help you with all of that campaign communications, and that will be money well spent. Right?
Yes.
You don't have to do it internally. You can do it externally. You can also
And that will go away at the end of the campaign.
That's right.
So that is a good thing to outsource.
That's right. You can also have someone do grant writing and prospect research for you. So those things are all easily done from someone on the outside.
Yes.
And effectively. Again, that can go away after the campaign. You don't need to worry about ongoing funding unless they're so good and it works so well that you decide to keep them on afterwards, which happens. That's the ideal situation. So here's what we've talked about. Right in the beginning, we've talked about finding a way to free up some of your executive director's time so that you add a portion of your executive director to your development staff, right? That's number one, and a great thing to do. Number two is to really take a good, careful look at how your fundraising staff works, make sure it's well organized, and see what kind of support you need, both in your everyday operation and with the additional load of the campaign. It may be that that's administrative support, but it may be that you need a different position. Maybe you choose to have a campaign manager or a major gifts officer or somebody that you've needed anyway. And the campaign coming along is a good opportunity to actually increase your staff. So that's number 2. Number 3, as you get ready for the broadening of your campaign in the campaign kickoff and the public phase of the campaign, you for sure will need more hands on deck to make all of that happen. And that may well be virtual assistants or administrative support to the people who are on board. It's just a ton of work.
Yeah.
To make all of that happen well.
So we have a great development office readiness assessment that will help people think through some of these positions and projects and departments on our website. So if you go to capitalcampaignpro.com and click on the resources tab, free resources, you can download the development office readiness assessment and see where you stack up and where you're doing great and where you might need some support. So I hope you'll go check out that free resource. Andrea, great conversation today. I hope this was helpful to listeners. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining Amy and Andrea for today's All About Capital Campaigns. To learn more about them and their work together, visit capitalcampaignpro.com, where you'll find all the help you'll need for your campaign. And please follow, rate, and review us on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you.